What are some rules about life as a homeless person that would surprise you? When dumpster diving, if you find a pair of shoes or clothes that aren't your size, then you leave them neatly by the side of the dumpster for the next diver. Look out for each other and be good to each other. We're all struggling, so let's make it as good as we can for each other. When I was homeless, we paid for each other's food, clothes, and any other essentials if one was truly in need. Honestly, I think most people would be surprised by how much the poor take care of each other. My family was homeless for a few months after coming to the US. Other immigrants gave us food, clothing, babysitting, informal English lessons, job leads, and most importantly, advice and guidance. When my mother, working as a house cleaner, got a chance to clean out fridges, she shared with other families with small children first. My parents never ate anything before we ate. They only ate what we didn't. There were some thieves and general bad people, but everyone knew who they were. Shady employers were much worse and much harder to avoid. A lot of businesses just exist to scam the poor and needy. It's sickening. In happier news, I found some of the other families that helped us out on Facebook a few years ago, and everyone is doing pretty well for themselves. A kid I was friends with in the shelter is a professor at a well-known college, and my parents own a business. You don't beg on someone's corner if they're already there. My dad told me about the time he had to live homeless for a week for a class. He was working toward being a Catholic deacon. He has a lot of stories from it, but the one that stuck with me was his first night of being homeless. He woke up covered in layers of cardboard with a rock on top to hold it in place. The other homeless took care of him on his first night on the streets. When I was in college, my sociology professor gave us the option of being homeless in a big city for a weekend for extra credit. I wonder if anyone ever took him up on that particular assignment. That seems like a dangerous assignment that can result in a lawsuit. He'd probably make them sign a liability waiver. One of my college professors made us drive through an ethnic neighborhood, a ghetto, and map it out. We all had to sign a liability waiver exempting any danger, including injury and death. This was not an extra credit assignment either. We had no real choice. There's a certain level of tenure where apparently you can just send your students out into potentially dangerous situations for ships and giggles then. Be wary of items given to you by other people. My cousin counseled homeless youth for a few years, and one of his favorites got sent to jail for accepting a gift of a cell phone. The phone ended up being stolen out of the owner's car and had GPS attached to it. The police found him with the phone and arrested him on the spot. My cousin was called in as a character witness to testify on his behalf. Not sure what happened after that, though. Sleep with your phone by your ball bag, so if someone tries to rob you while you sleep, they can't find your phone. You share what you have with your group. What goes around comes around. If there are a group of you, each person can stand on a different corner to beg and make far more than you would by yourself. Do homeless people normally group together? It does seem like it would be safer that way. I've been both solo and hanging out with a group. Each have their own pros and cons. Solo means you don't have to share, do whatever you want, easier to hitch, but in a group you aren't as lonely and you're safer from people who like to pick on the homeless. How are you on Reddit, dude? I've heard it's next to impossible to break free from homelessness. Tell us your story, if you will. I use a smartphone. In this day and age, it's a huge resource for being homeless. If you're lucky enough to get your hands on one, that is. I chose to leave home at 17 after an altercation with my mum. She was a tweaker. I packed a guitar and a sleeping bag and some clothes and headed for Portland. After I got there, I slept under Burnside near the Mission as my first night out. What an eye-opening experience. I played guitar to earn change for food and the occasional stay at a flophouse. Then I started hitching to change the scenery. That's a really long story. I was out for about 4 years. I'm lucky enough to have made a lot of good friends over the years, and one of them is helping me get back on my feet. Still a pain in the butt finding a job, but oh well. Respect your elders, aka don't F with the old-timers. Old-timers age-wise or homeless-wise, like who outranks who, a guy in his mid-40s who had been homeless for a decade, or a 60-year-old who had just lost his home. Usually the guys who've been there longer, the 40-year-old guy outranks the 60-year-old guy in this case, but it wouldn't be well looked upon to F with the 60-year-old guy either, unless there was some kind of rumor going around about him, and unfortunately rumors don't need much verification for the homeless community to believe them when it comes to the newcomers. I lived on the streets in Seattle in 2000 and lived in shelters and transitional houses for many years after that. I was 15 at the time and there was a pretty big homeless population there. We had some weird rules. I mostly lived on Broadway, and each homeless group really had their own rules. There were also the Avrants, who lived up by the university. They had a whole political system. People were at the top, and people were at the bottom. You could also get kicked off the Av, and most of those kids would end up on Broadway. Almost everyone on Broadway was a junkie or gay. And there were the downtown kids, mostly young foster runaways or kids with mental issues. Lots of juggalos down there. So I guess we were sort of the crazy group. The big one I remember is that you always take off your shoes when you sleep. And if you sleep outside, sleep on top of your bag and tuck your shoes under it. Sometimes my bag was way too packed to pull that off comfortably, but people would take your shoes just to mess with you. They'd call the annoying or new kids oogles, but they wouldn't ever kick someone else out of the neighborhood like Avrats. Just too much smack going around really to have that kind of control. Probably the most offensive thing you can do is finding out where someone else who's homeless lives. If you follow them, they'll stop and talk to you, and if you just enter a squat uninvited, well, it's really dangerous. It was respectful to pretend like you didn't care where your friends went at night. At any point, you can get uninvited too. You'll just be locked out that night. They don't give a crap about where you're staying. This isn't a pity party. Broadway is pretty small too, just about 7 blocks long. So people would panhandle right next to you all the time. If they weren't at least 2 shops away, they were probably doing it to tee you off. Or it's just their normal spot. Like I always camped out in front of this Mexican place because they had awesome leftovers. But it was absolutely uncool to sit or lie down around other homeless kids, or stand on the side of the sidewalk that the stores are on. It's illegal on Broadway, and doing that just attracts the cops. I remember asking other homeless kids to stand all the time, just because I was sick of getting picked up by the cops. Lots of thefts too. No real idea of a moral code at all there. Although people would share their substances with you all the time. That way they had someone to bug about sharing back when they didn't have any cash. Later on, I lived at Tent City and still got stuff stolen from me quite often, even though they have a decent community there. Backstory time. I'd moved down to Florida with a friend almost on a whim. Had about $1,000 saved up at the time. He was going to get us out of the state and meet up with a girl who he later caught cheating on him. And I'd just recently broken up and wanted a good escape from Minnesota. After 2 months, we were no longer welcomed at our arranged place to stay, and I hadn't yet landed a job. We had an apartment lined up, but at this time I was already a few hundred short of the deposit check, which had been written to secure an apartment already. I'd already met a few people my age who were homeless and knew of an abandoned apartment complex with screened-in porches. I'd paid my phone bill 3 months in advance and had something about $120 of credit on the bill. Old candy bar phone, minimal texting and low minutes plan, but unlimited on nights and weekends. That made it pretty easy to stay in contact with people and very essential for getting a job. Came to find out later that my friend never replaced the rent check, which means I should have just stayed with him, but I only found out after one of my former roommates up there had convinced me I needed to come back and whip the boys in the apartment into shape. I paid her a full month's rent before moving out, just so she would have some backup in case her boyfriend and the other roommate had issues. Still on the lease, and Hurricane Katrina was coming. Those 90-degree palm trees. I shipped what I couldn't carry on the bus back to my place and hopped on a Greyhound. Anyway, my community's rule was, if you're trying to run away from good parents and are underage, we will make sure the police find you. This kid was 15, and after talking with his friends, we heard no reason for him to be running away. Just teenage angst. Made sure the police took him home, and I left my cell phone number in case he ran away again. Just because I was homeless, that didn't mean I didn't work 2 jobs. Would work about 56 hours a week at the gas station between 2 stores, and then did the usual selling papers on the streets in the morning. As a former homeless teen though, I will say that I was welcomed with open arms. I didn't come from a good home, and so when I finally got kicked out and ran away, kicked out at first, then when I didn't come back they claimed me as a runaway, I was shown how to get money, where and when to sleep, how to get food, and the best diners to chill at during cold nights. There's no way I would have made it myself if it wasn't for the help I got from fellow homeless people. A lot of really striking stories here. I can't get over how rampant homelessness seems in the US compared to other first world countries I've lived in, even with the people in question working more than full-time in some cases. I was 15 when I ran away from home because my mother threw a cast iron frying pan at my head. I didn't even have the chance to grab my shoes or a good pair of pants, and there were people who instantly helped me on my feet. I was able to find shelter, a tent city, by the end of the day. I was directed to 3 square meals per day, and from there, my own place and my own life. I was on the streets for a matter of 9 months. My advice: don't loan out anything you need to expect back. You don't have to make friends with people to survive. In fact, it's often better if you don't know a lot of people. Just don't behave like a butthead to anybody. You never know when they'll help out. There's no need to burn a bridge before you have to cross it. If someone is helping you out, be super freaking polite about it. A lot of shelters and programs have strict guidelines for how long you can use their programs. If you're polite, they might help you out a little beyond that, or they might use their contacts to get you in a better position, moving forward to the next step. If someone shares something with you, if you can return the favor, do it. If you're a runaway, don't take anything with you that was paid for by your parents. The cops can go after you as if you were a thief. If you have to run, then treat it like a clean break. Aim not to be homeless. It can be fun, just living on the street and not having expectations, but your goal should be to get the frick out of there. Try to get your education in order, get certifications, and get yourself a job. A lot of programs are available for the homeless. Take advantage of them. Don't do substances or get drunk. I know that sounds like a written rule, but there are a lot of homeless people who commune by getting trashed together or become homeless after picking up a habit. Fricking avoid this. It's expensive, both in time and money, and most people aren't going to give you crap if you say no. And they won't give you crap if you say yes. You're responsible for yourself. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. My brother, who is mentally ill, was homeless on the streets of DC. He says the other homeless people got him food and forced him to eat it when he looked like he would starve because the voices in his head were telling him to avoid all food. They also made sure he had shelter and generally kept his completely helpless butt alive for almost a year. Like someone else said, I never had a problem with food. Anyway, my rules were 1. Find a group of people you can trust, that's not easy to do by the way, and stick with them. 2. Don't be the guy with the sign asking for money. Ever. If you must ask for money, state the reason why, and if someone says, "Instead of giving you the money, I'll just pay for it myself and give it to you," don't turn that down. Fricking ever. 3. People think all homeless people are on substances because that's the stereotype they're presented with. Do your best not to blend in with those people. You'd be amazed at what people are willing to do if you're making an honest attempt at getting on your feet, and you do your best to present yourself that way. 4. Don't do anything stupid to get money, like crime or doing the deed with people for money. You will regret it. And don't be a fricking rat on people who do it. That crap will get you killed. Remember, a lot of the people in your world are off the grid. 5. If you're getting nowhere in the city you're in, get out of there. There's always someone headed your way. 6. Never ever turn down a chance to do some work. Never. That may be an opportunity to get you started again. 7. Even if you're not religious, if a religious family offered you a place to stay, sometimes, if you go to church with us, but not always, don't turn it down. And don't do anything to them such as steal or rob from them. That's how reputations get started. 8. You're never too good for anything. If you think you are, that might be why you're out there to begin with. 9. Yeah, those clothes might stink, but at least you have some. 10. Americans, if you're young enough, the military may be your best option. Money, food, bed, and job, and all that you have to do is show up. 11. Stay off substances. That again might be why you're out there and could very well cost you a chance to get off the streets. I'm sure that's not what you're asking, but it's been over 20 years since I got back on my feet, and those are the things that have stuck with me. My source? Being homeless for 2 years. I was homeless for about 4 months in Las Vegas. Rules I learned in the area, keep in mind that I'm a girl by the way. 1. Don't walk around without some sort of knife because drunk, stupid people like to pick on homeless people. 2. Search each machine you can for loose change and vouchers. Also, if you spend $1 at the penny slots and need a drink, you can get free ones on Fremont Street, which is also a great source of free entertainment when you're bored. 3. If you find a friend, make sure one watches while one sleeps. 4. Make use of shelter money. In Vegas, there's a social service run by a church outfit that provides you with housing vouchers if you're one of the first 10 people in line in the morning. You can find a friend, double up on the vouchers in some places, and get weekly rental for an entire month. This is awesome during the summer when it's 120 degrees outside and you need AC and a shower. This is also cool if you find a job with a telemarketing company or something that requires you to shower daily. 5. If you get involved in substances or have a gambling problem and you're already homeless, you're pretty much destined to remain homeless in Vegas. 6. If you have food stamps, share. I once had a homeless man buy me a sandwich and it was the most humbling experience of my entire life. My backstory? Well, I was 23 and newly divorced with no job and nowhere to turn. My ex kicked me out, so I moved to Arizona from Texas. I'm originally from California and stayed with some friends. I met the wrong kind of people and ended up on a 4-month bender with a guy we'll call D-Bag. Basically, I did all sorts of bad stuff and had no support from my family because they saw the path I was headed on and told me I needed to pull my crap together. So I was homeless in Vegas because it seemed like the land of opportunity. Once I realized it wasn't, I stopped doing substances. I got that voucher and got a job at a telemarketing place. Then, after a few weeks, I called my brother, basically ate my crow, and came to live with him. 3 jobs, an apartment, and an illness later, I was back at my mum's after 2 years. 2 years after that, I was an EMT. Then, social services became my calling. 2 years ago, I moved back to Northern California, got back into school, and got a job at a car wash. Now, I'm a 4.0 student in college, and I'm focusing on finishing 2 degrees and transferring to a UC in the next year. It's been a lot of hard work, reflection, and blind luck. Also, financial aid is awesome. I wouldn't change anything, and I'm almost 30 and I've done a lot. But the adventure continues. Basically, just keep going and eventually something will break. That's about all I've got. It's pretty gnarly out there, and I'm definitely glad I'm no longer homeless. I gave back what I can these days and am pursuing a career in social services so that I can continue to help others. What a story. I can imagine being on the streets in a place with as many tempting diversions to burn your money on as Vegas could turn into a sort of spiral of self-destruction. Well done on getting out of there, really. Homeless for 5 years here, since I was 18, here's a few I've noticed. Prison and jail culture bleeds into the homeless community. Watch your words. Words normal people get to say can have serious meanings on the streets. One example, saying the B word to someone might get you attacked. Watch your mouth or you won't last long. No one's pressing charges or calling the cops. If you get into a fight with someone, it's all he said, she said bullcrap. Everyone takes it and conflicts resolve themselves. Everyone you're around is homeless. You've got to stay in that shelter with them every night. You'll share the same public spaces that everyone who's homeless has to. You don't have a choice. Keep to yourself, don't mouth off, and don't F with anyone else, or you'll get F'd with. Your cigs are everyone else's cigs. Everyone on the street smokes, and if you've got them, you're probably going to end up sharing them. I've been technically homeless about 3 times before the age of 15, but you wouldn't be able to tell it just by looking at me or conversing briefly. Average-looking, white, 20-year-old male college student. Without explaining a ton of other stuff and including many sad stories, I'll get to the meat of the question. For my family, I remembered that we would go to the library every day for several hours at a time. It's a place where extended stays aren't particularly unusual. Additionally, you have AC, heat, internet, computer access, water fountains, bathrooms, lounge chairs, and nearly endless educating vessels surrounding you in the form of books. In conclusion, if you're ever homeless, go to the library. I was homeless at age 17, but lived in a shelter and not on the street. My experiences might vary from yours. Don't fricking trust anyone. The women in my shelter would befriend you and backstab you just to laugh at you when you got kicked out. Are there a lot of working girls in the area? Chances are some of the women in the shelter are part of that problem. Mental illness. Mental illness everywhere. Doesn't have to be severe, but there are a lot of messed up people. Be careful who you confront, especially if you're unsure of their mental capacity. Do you own things of any value? Well, better keep them to yourself because some butthole will try to steal them and resell them. You don't mess with other people's children. Seriously, you don't know who is friends with who and who might F your crap up. Also, don't make comments about their baby daddies if it's very obvious they have several. Touchy subject usually. Don't steal each other's food. If you do, they will hunt you and find you. I once saw a woman have substances planted on her so that she'd get kicked out once they found out she was stealing food. I used to do Food Not Bombs in DC. We served meals every Sunday for several years and I got to know a lot of the homeless people in the city. I saw quite a bit of mental illness afflicting some seriously brilliant people. One guy would pull out photocopies of the Shroud of Turin, trying to convince us that Jesus had no private parts, and go on a rant from there. Another homeless guy once cut him off saying, "He's trying to lobotomize Jesus between the legs." The latter guy ruled. He'd quote Thomas Aquinas and lived for a pat, by which he meant a little hug. My experience taught me 2 things. The first is that the group we dealt with were often super grateful for the food we brought because it tasted good. It's sort of how I learned to cook. Had lots of vegetables and we didn't preach to them about religion. I remember one guy saying, "I don't need you to try and save me before giving me a stale bologna sandwich." The other thing is that the people we served almost never begged for money. They would quietly try to make things work. It tended to be the addicts who would beg. That said, there was this one guy who would ask for money whenever I saw him around the city, and I'd offer to buy him food. He jumped at the offer twice and went nuts at a 7-Eleven and a breakfast place, respectively. He was hungry. There are some jerks in the homeless community, but there are also some jerks with homes. That's the long and short of it. I have a bunch of stories, but I'd say that if you have the time to stop and talk with the person for a minute, you can learn a lot and measure whether it's worth trying to help them out. Save every penny. Buy a tent. Put your tent next to a river. Go to the library every single day. Spend as much time as you can applying for jobs. Take the first job you can get. Keep bathing in the river and working until winter. Do not spend a dime on booze. Once winter comes, get an apartment and keep working. Apply to your local technical college and get a job in IT. Stop being homeless. It worked for me. To any road folk in Tennessee, make your way to Hippie Hill in Christiana. It's near Manchester. They will feed you and set you up with a tent or trailer to stay in until you get back on your feet. All they ask for is a little bit of help around the land. Ask for hippie or mama. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.